Hey, it's been a while, hasn't it? So, funny story, I'd planned a bunch of videos for October simply because I wanted to review both FnaF and MGS in the span of such. So I just went and decided to make plans for 5 total videos. Fearing that I wouldn't be able to make each video in the span of a week, I decided to make videos on things that had already been released in September and just wait to release them. I had gotten 2 of these videos done, and one of which was a video on Oblitus Casa. I was literally putting up the finishing touches on it when I got an update saying that Oblitus Casa 2.0 had been released, and ooh, that was a punch to the gut. So now I'd hate for yet another 20-minute long video analysis of a fan game to go to waste. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to release this video now, and then hopefully another video on the 2.0 update on the day I originally planned for this video to come out. So there's going to be a lot of outdated stuff in this video, but I couldn't make myself trash over 2 weeks of work and have good confidence that I would be able to finish the video on time. Hopefully this goes well. Now, I'm no mathematician, but judging by the amount of views on my juniors review I did earlier this year, I'm going to take a bet and say that you probably didn't watch it. Shame on you, viewer. Shame on you. It's not one of my worser videos, except for the mention of Sparkcast that didn't age well, but in that video, I said that Juniors was part of what I called the 2022 Fangame Trifecta. These were 3 fan games released in 2022 to great applause, at least from what I saw. I saw much more coverage of these 3 games than I did Fazbear Entertainment Storage or Tierland, and thus I declare them a trifecta. And today we will continue with such, with what might be the scariest FNAF fan game I've ever played. For those who don't know, Oblitus Casa is the 2022 requel of the Radiance 2020 version of Five Nights at Treasure Island, and that's a whole can of worms I could get to in another time, but let me share my quick opinions on that game. Treasure Island is one of the most solid FNAF fan games ever. It's nothing revolutionary, but it really is up there with Candies and Popgoes and such. But I will not deny that Treasure Island is pretty cheesable. You can just dance with the power in your office and turn off cameras when you need to. But as far as cheesable games went, I found this game to be pretty fun. And Hourglass Night throws cheesing out the window, and this is one of the best Final Nights I've ever played in any fan game, even though I have no understanding of what's happening before or after or during the events of the game. And I will say that the enemies looked good for the time, but they pale in comparison to their counterparts in Oblitus Casa. Oblitus Casa is better than Treasure Island in every way. It is one of the greatest FNAF games of all time, but you have to jump through some hoops to get to the best parts. Allow me to explain. Oblitus Casa opens on a terrifying title screen akin to FNAF 4's. A lonely cabin with darkness at every corner and nothing but fear for what awaits us and such. Also, the game doesn't want you to stop playing. Holding down the escape key just resets the game, and if there's a way to close the program on the UI, I haven't yet to find it. Absolutely terrifying. We begin the game listening to an audio log of Jake and his therapist, Dr. Rowley, telling Jake to try and recall what exactly happened to him on Discovery Island, which is a real place when you know it. It was a section of the Animal Kingdom and it was literally abandoned by Disney in the 90s. Now, from my understanding, Jake escaped the Pirate Caverns after the first game and went to hide in this cabin. Sometime in between, all the phone guys from the first game were killed, and that is explained to us by a notepad on the first night. Speaking of the first night... Okay, one of the key moments in any video game is the first few moments. Many people, myself included, have stuff to do. If I'm not hooked in the first few minutes of playing a game, it's less and less likely I'll get around to finishing it. The FNAF style games have always had trouble with this, and having a good night 1 in any game is difficult, and sadly, Oblitus Casa doesn't necessarily rise above the bar in this standard. The first night puts us in the cabin with 2 main threats. We're told by this notepad that our friends are dead and that we need to lure that thing with the noise. We have access to the cabin's camera system, and unlike Treasure Island, it doesn't take power. It also has a music system and camera flashes, which are on a cooldown. This is where Willy comes in, this demented version of the original Mickey Mouse.
Are you the first original Mickey Mouse?
It'll make its way towards the office, but is lured by the camera's music, so it's basically Springtrap from FNAF 3. but he's the only threat that occurs on this night, so we can really just park him in one camera and wait till 6 a.m. The other threat is called Belial, which is one of the 2 Hortensias in this game. On the notepad with the instructions, a crude sketch of an Hortensia will form, and we need to erase it before it fully forms. So she's basically the puppet, but I don't know why, but this is so much better. I think it might be the fact that it takes place outside the camera and isn't merely as mind-numbing. And that's it for night 1. Yeah, the difficulty on these 2 is way too easy, resulting in an all-around mind-numbing experience. Oh, and let me say, I never got around to this game for the longest time because for the first night, for some reason, towards the end of the night, I would always get jump scared by Hortensia with no rhyme or reason. I had ensured that the notepad was erased for the whole night, and yet I'd still lose around 5:30 every time. Okay, correction, this is apparently a scripted event. It's not Belial jump scaring you at 5:30, but Mother, just to make sure that you go through the Post-Mortem tutorial. It was still something that I had a lot of trouble getting around, as we're about to see, but yeah, well, correction. This was reason number 1. I had very little interest in this game prior to making this video. Reason number 2 is what happens after you die. Post-Mortem. Post-Mortem is really fun and an incredibly clever way to pop back up to life. I always figure the death minigames in FNAF 2 should have given you a second chance. In Post-Mortem, we're put into this twisted nightmare afterlife area with different sections representing the different parts of the Abandoned by Disney canon. We fend off the Shades, who are even more twisted versions of the characters we fought in Treasure Island. To get back to life, we have to find 3 Mickey heads. If that doesn't sound at all specific, it's because it isn't. The Mickey heads in particular are these stone statues of sorts, not any Easter eggs you find in Disneyland, because there are a ton of those. And then the Shades themselves. Sadie is just Hortensia again, acts as a timer to find all the Mickey heads. Photo-negative Nikki and Oswald can be scared off by stabbing this needle into this Mickey doll, adorably called Your Best Friend, but stabbing him too much will just bring Hortensia closer, so be careful. Goofy will try and steal Your Best Friend, repel him with a light, and Minnie will appear at random, just pull up the monitor, and some Mickey heads have a faint Donald hologram around him, and if you click them, he'll yell at you, leaving you defenseless. Are you confused yet? Because the game is absolutely horrible at explaining this to you. You get a handful of sentences being incredibly vague on what you're supposed to do. I think that's kind of a problem for both the Disney Radiance games. They sacrifice clarity for a good scare. Now let me emphasize, I really like this mode, but if you play it without any prior knowledge on what you're supposed to do, you're not going to be ended up scared, you're just going to be confused. One of my favorite FNAF fan games of all time is Pop Goes, but I see lots of people dunking on that game because it doesn't really have a good explanation of what to do. And I agree, that game is terrible at explaining what you're supposed to do. But if you know what to do, Pop Goes is a blast, and I feel the same way about Post-Mortem. And that clarity is sacrificed for a really good scare, mind you. Oblitus Casa is one of the scariest games I've played, period. The characters and environments are all massively improved from Treasure Island, and there is a massive need to keep things away from you at all costs. They twist these characters into downright unrecognizable monsters. That's not to say I consider Steamboat Willie a horror movie now, but I separate these characters pretty well in my mind. Anyway, back to gameplay. Let's say you make it through night 1. Great, you're met with the shine of the sun, which is something we don't see enough of. Like, holy cow, this screen is comforting. But it's immediately ripped from us as we are now taken to the tunnels. I do not like the tunnels. We are told to navigate this grid of tunnels and to use our ears to find a way out. If we use our light, we can't hear. I honestly don't know what they were expecting you to do. There is a faint jingle you can hear occasionally among all the other sounds you can hear. That's the one that leads us the right way. There's also the looming threat down here being Hourglass. Yeah, I think that the idea was something like Metal Gear Ray from Rising, whereas they were just trying to make you say, oh, if the final boss of the first game is down here, the upcoming threat must be terrifying. And while that does happen, I think this guy also kind of makes him less threatening in a way. His design is awesome, but such a cool character is relegated to tunnels. And fending him off is weird. I can't tell if I'm supposed to use my light on him at all, and neither is the game. Also, I'm not sure who thought Hourglass's voice would sound so normal. And this isn't playtime with Percy or Jolly's situation where the tunnels are different. No, they are the exact same every night. I hated them. They were reason number 3 I couldn't get into this game. And it all just gave the game a trial and error vibe, which is just something I've never seen work in a survive till game. The game doesn't really change all this much from here on out, save for adding new threats and just getting all around harder. So let's speedrun. Night 2, we have 2 new threats. First of all, the Face. Outside of Custom Nights and Hourglass, they is the only character to return from Treasure Island. He has a much more fleshy design and it's radical. It's honestly hard to go back to the original. He also introduces nifty gameplay addition. He resides in the attic, and when you hear him thump up there, you need to go up and flash your lighter on him. Wait too long, and it's lights out. Entering and exiting the attic takes time, so you need to be absolutely certain you're safe from all other threats before you check on him, similar to Acephalus from Treasure Island. There's something I find incredibly annoying about this though. Your view of the attic fades in very slowly, and the Face blends in with the environment. While this creates an incredible atmosphere, it can be tricky to spot him at first, and if you don't shine your light quickly enough, it's game over. I feel like they went a little bit overboard with the fade here, which brings us back to the same problem I have with Post-Mortem. The game puts good scares over coherent gameplay mechanics. You could say this is a problem with horror genre in general, but I'm just gonna put that right there. On night 2, you don't really have much of a problem with the Face though, because the only other threat you have is Daisy, who's non-lethal. She looks just like disembodied from Treasure Island, and her mechanic is basically Balloon Boys from FNAF 3. Look at her camera for too long and she'll temporarily disable your monitor and attic usage. The camera she was on will also be disabled for a time after. You can scare her off with her camouflage, but you don't even need to look for her. On this night, while you can keep Willy on a single camera, she's pretty unnoticeable, but on later nights, she became the absolute bane of my existence. Night 3, photonegative Minnie. She starts in the dining room, flash her when she's on the ground, that's it. So you can keep Willy on one camera, Minnie on the other, erase, face, rinse, repeat. Though Daisy did throw a wrench into the mix, Daisy only appears when you change cameras. She won't just pop out of one if you look for too long. While I wasn't too concerned about this on this night, it eventually got to the point where I refused to switch cameras unless I had my flash ready because her disabling cameras could cost you your run, but that was much more of a problem later on. For nights 2 and 3, I didn't die once on my first playthrough. I mean, I did in tunnels, but that's a different problem. 3 of the 5 main nights just juggle between mind-numbing and mind-boggling. Why is this game so loved again? Because of everything afterwards. Night 4 introduces 2 new threats. One is Dippy, who was the original concept for Goofy. He's similar to Willy in that he follows sound, but unlike Willy, Dippy makes his way towards the window, and he will break it to get in. So we must lure the two separately to keep them away. This is what FNAF 3 was missing. More threats to lure and keep track of. Oh wait, the two starting cameras are both next to camera 7. Just lure them there for the whole night, right? Well, you do have Daisy and Minnie, who will throw a wrench in your plans if you're not careful. I actually died to Minnie a handful of times, but there's a new threat in the attic. Pete. More specifically, his rendition from the original Steamboat Willie. He's the opposite of the Face, where he'll make sounds identical to the Faces, but if you're in the attic with him for too long, he'll jump scare you. And remember that problem with the fade I was talking about earlier? It makes it nearly impossible to tell if you're looking at Pete or not in the time to avoid being killed. This isn't too big of a problem once you figure out that Pete doesn't make sound in the attic like the Face does. Once you figure that out, the game comes together so nicely. Night 4 is a real challenge that feels fair and fun. Even when I'm somewhat cheesing the game by not letting one out of the first 2 cameras, look how quickly my mouse is moving. Yeah, this game is cheesable, but less so than the original, and even more fun. It still keeps your brain engaged with the attic mechanic and Daisy. Whenever you hear a thump, you have seconds to decide what needs to be taken care of now, or what can wait until you get back. Or if you want to change cameras and flash it out, do you take that risk? And if you take too long deciding, it's game over. Night 4 was a challenge I was incredibly happy to have pulled through. I just feel like we should have been given these threats in a little different order. I think if Dippy and Minnie were introduced earlier, we'd have an overall better game on our hands. Then after beating Night 4, I was reminded we have to go back into the tunnels, find our way out of it, go through one more even harder night, and then the final boss. This game's Hourglass, right before... Wait, what is this, cutscene?
It will all end here. I will make sure of it.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Most FNAF games and Fangames have you play through 5 normal nights or levels, and then have the 6th either be something entirely new, introduce a new type of animatronic, or just be the game's hardest challenge, in the case of the original Scott games. Oblitus Casa knows you want 5 nights, and you got 5 nights. This isn't necessarily good or bad, it's just out of the ordinary for a boss night to be on 5 in a Fangame. You expect that to be night 6, but no, that's just a harder version of night 4 in this game. And Holy cow, the fifth night is good. After we burn Hourglass and the mother is upset with us because we killed her children, it's a whole thing, I'm sure Posterior someone can explain it. She sends MickMick after us. MickMick doesn't look too threatening on the surface. Just a distorted, eyeless Mickey Mouse more than anything. In this form, he takes on the role of Willy, and we can lure him around with the music. While he's in this state, Mother can appear on any of the cameras and act similar to Daisy, save for once she disables the camera, it's gone for good, seriously raising the difficulty. But at any time, MickMick will grow these glowing eyes. Granted, they're the same eyes Mother uses, somewhat explaining her inactivity in this form, but there's something about them. The way they look into the camera in those wide sockets. For some reason, I find this so hard to not think about, and they just make the character spike in the creep factor. I do get specific PTSD flashbacks when I see this, so this might just be me, but I can't help but find this form one of the most disturbing and scary in the game. When MickMick has his eyes, he takes on the role of photo-negative Minnie. We flash him and he moves back a camera. But MickMick isn't the only threat we have on this night. Not only does the notepad fill itself at record speed with Mother's face instead of Hortensia's, there's still the case of the attic. PETA is gone, but the face is immune to the Mother's control and is moving at lightning pace. He is an absolute pain at first, because this time he reappears after you flash your light at him and you must continue until he's gone for good. Not only this, but he's redesigned to be much darker in the final night, making him so much harder to pinpoint. I trial and errored my way around him, so take my advice. Figure out which 4 spots he appears in. The 2 spots on the right are basically on top of each other, so make your cursor dance between the 3 spots until he goes away. Go back downstairs and deal with the other problems. Speaking of other problems, MickMick will occasionally go into the attic and lure you up there, and it's completely possible for him to do that while the face is up there painting you into a corner, which is just a huge blemish on this night. But mostly, it wasn't hard to tell when MickMick was in the attic, and when the face was. I died most often to the face on this night, and there is no post-mortem for this night around. You do this in one shot and you do it well. And every time I died, I felt every muscle in my body loosen due to how tight I was. I massaged my arm, which had been moving my mouse around like I had 5 minutes to make a billboard ad, and I had to catch my breath before jumping back into another attempt. And that's not me needing more exercise, I work out daily. Also, one last thing. At approximately 3 a.m., MickMick goes through a transformation. He doesn't change his mechanics at all, save for going much faster, but he does become easily the scariest and most disturbing character in the game. His limbs and face are all elongated, making him look like Huggy Wuggy when he's enclosed in such a tight space. And I've never felt such fear from this franchise before. This design is something I feel actively scared of. For once in the game, I didn't feel scared of losing and starting over. I felt scared of an actual character. I look away from this thing and any detail of it I don't remember to the T is just painted in the worst possible picture. I don't usually get nightmares, and while I haven't as of recording, I was legitimately left scared of this thing at night, and I never wanted to attempt night 5 right before bed because of him. After the credits roll, we have the previously mentioned Night 6, Custom Night and Challenge Night. Night 6 is just harder than Night 4, but I still had a lot of fun going through it, and it was nice to have Post-Mortem back. Then there are the Creepypasta Challenge Nights. Based upon different Creepypastas, these nights change up the gameplay for different sections of the game. Jeff the Killer is Post-Mortem, where we have to turn on the cameras with limited light. I failed, miserably. Smile Dog is the main game, save where you have to race the Smile Jog drawing. I have no idea what I was doing wrong. The screen would turn red, I'd go to try and find the pooch, and I just couldn't find him on any camera. Not to mention that erasing the drawing shook my mouse back and forth like an earthquake. And Slender and Eyeless Jack are modified tunnels. Granted, I did end up beating Slender, but I did not understand Eyeless Jack. I got a picture on the accident, and then promptly fell asleep and died. These are crazy neat additions, but again, I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. And the Creepypasta Nights unlock new characters for the Custom Nights, which is quite possibly the best part of the game. Having access to all threats and new ones is awesome. You can even turn the difficulty cap off and just send the characters into integer overload style difficulty. I'm sure someone's beaten it. Granted, there aren't any set challenges, which kind of blows away a lot of the motivation, but this is really one of the best custom nights I've ever seen. Can you tell I'm tired? I think one of the worst things you can do to your game is ensuring that the best parts are after the credits roll. Yeah, there should be something to do at that point, be it New Game Plus or post-game content. But if the best parts of your game are after the main campaign, you better have a dang good campaign, because if you don't, Disneyland is not nearly as fun after running a marathon. That is the problem with games like Destiny or The Division. You have to grind for hours to get to the real game. On the journey to unlock the custom night for Oblitus Casa, you must endure 3 tests for chimps, 4 tests for goldfish, and research however much stuff you didn't quite get from the vague tooltips the game gives you. Nights 4 through 6 are all great, but by the time I was done with them, I had the freedom to delve into the custom night. I just wanted to lie down. And I didn't do this all in one sitting. It took the course of a week to beat this game for me. Getting all these thoughts down on paper makes me realize that my thoughts on Oblitus Casa are almost the same as Five Nights at Candy's Remastered, just more extreme. Candy's Remastered is easy and mind-numbing. I looked at it once, said, hey, I'm just gonna play this till I die, and then I beat it. I didn't die once during my initial run. I would never recommend anyone play Candy's Remastered. I think it's pretty boring. But Null Night is legitimately one of the greatest FNAF fan game nights I've ever played. I've never replayed Candy's, but I've gone back to Null Night time and time again. So that begs the question, is it worth sitting through 6 boring nights to get to one fantastic one? The same question goes for Oblitus Casa. Is it worth sitting through 3 boring nights, abysmal tunnel sections, and death minigames with little to no instructions to get a revolutionary 4th, 5th, and custom night? That all boils down to personal preference. Though it's a bit different from Candy's because Oblitus Casa itself is great, unlike Candy's where only Null Night is great. The main campaign is just a little lackluster. If you love custom nights, you'll have a blast with this one. I personally don't usually delve into custom nights, yet I was really intrigued by this one. Just not enough to stay awake for such. Oblitus Casa is one of the greatest FNAF fan games of all time. It has some of the best designed characters and environments in a fan game, amazing core gameplay, but is just a piece of work. The game being very vague with its mechanics and incredibly slow started to the campaign create a barrier around the player. If you don't think you can break that barrier, then I wouldn't waste your time. But if you can get through it, I will not deny that you have yourself a true indie horror gem. And, okay, let's address the mouse in the pool. Oblitus Casa, as of writing, is no longer on Game Jolt. Why? Because Team Radiance is working on Oblitus Casa Snyder Cut, Oblitus Casa 2.0. So I think this analysis might be a little pre-cooked, but rest assured, once this 2.0 comes, I will cover it. Well, maybe. For all I know, they may just add more tunnel sections.
I just had to open my mouth! I just had to say it! As soon as I finish saying it, you suck!
But I'm sticking around for it. And definitely sticking around for Nightmare Below Disney, the upcoming spin-off to the Treasure Island games. Until then, thank you so much for watching. I'm pretty sure I ruffled some feathers talking about this game in any sort of negative light, but I hope all is forgiven. If not, send me hate mail or something, I don't know. That's the second of the 2022 Fangame Trifecta. Maybe if I feel like it, I'll talk about the last one before the end of the year. But that's a whole can of worms for another time, and I think I'm pretty packed for FNAF content for the year. But if you'd like to stay tuned for that, I don't know, I think there's like a button or something you can push. Anyway, that's all from me. My name is AJ Plays, and wait, there's an entire second game in here after you beat the main game? Maybe next time.